The restaurant went silent when the woman across from Daniel finally lifted her eyes. She had been staring at him for almost 10 seconds. Then she whispered, "You're Daniel Reed." Daniel's fork slipped from his hand. The sound of metal hitting porcelain seemed impossibly loud. He looked at the woman sitting beneath the warm restaurant lights. Elegant black dress, calm posture, diamond earrings, and eyes he had spent 7 years trying not to remember. "Claire." She gave the smallest nod. "I was hoping it wasn't you." Daniel stood so quickly his chair scraped across the floor. "I'm sorry." He reached for his coat. Claire didn't stop him. She simply asked, "How long were you planning to avoid me?" Daniel froze. Because the answer was simple. Forever. 7 years earlier, Daniel Reed had been a maintenance mechanic at a private aviation company outside Chicago. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. But he was good at fixing things. Machines, mostly. Sometimes people. He had a 5-year-old daughter named Lily, a small apartment, and a wedding ring he still kept in his toolbox because he wasn't ready to put it away. His wife had died suddenly after an illness. Daniel had learned to live around the empty space. Then Claire Morgan entered his life. She had been the company's youngest executive, brilliant and intimidating, already being prepared to become CEO. One winter evening, Claire's private jet developed a serious mechanical problem hours before an important flight. Daniel discovered the problem: a faulty fuel pressure system. Flying that night could have ended in disaster. Claire listened while Daniel explained the danger. But there was one complication. Her father, the company's chairman, had ordered the flight. Canceling it could cost the company millions. Claire looked at Daniel and asked quietly, "Are you certain?" Daniel nodded. "I'd rather lose my job than tell you something that could get you killed." She canceled the flight. The next morning, Daniel was fired. Not by Claire. By her father. Daniel never blamed her. But he also never gave her the chance to explain. Because that same week, something else happened. Lily collapsed at school. Daniel rushed her to the hospital. She needed immediate treatment for a condition nobody had known about. Daniel couldn't afford to lose another day's wages, let alone his insurance. So he left the aviation company behind. He took a job repairing industrial equipment at night. He became the father who slept 4 hours, packed lunches before sunrise, and smiled even when his hands were shaking from exhaustion. Years passed. Daniel never contacted Claire. Claire became CEO. Her company grew into one of the largest aviation firms in the country. Daniel remained invisible to her world, until a mutual friend decided both of them needed a blind date. Neither knew who the other person would be. And now they were sitting across from each other. Claire finally said, "You disappeared." Daniel looked down. "I had a daughter who needed me." Claire's expression changed. "Is she okay?" "She is now." A pause. Then Claire noticed something on his wrist. A faded hospital bracelet. Daniel instinctively covered it. Claire's face tightened. "You kept that?" Daniel shrugged. "It was the first night I knew she was going to be okay." Claire looked away. For the first time, the billionaire CEO didn't know what to say. Then came the second surprise. Lily wasn't Daniel's only responsibility. His elderly neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, had suffered a stroke 6 months earlier. Daniel had been helping care for her while her son worked overseas. He had been spending nearly every evening bringing groceries, changing light bulbs, fixing broken cabinet doors, and sitting beside her when she couldn't sleep. Claire stared at him. "You still do that?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Somebody has to." Claire almost laughed. "You always did say that." Daniel looked at her. "You remember?" "I remember more than you think." Then Claire told him something he never expected. She had known about his daughter. Years ago, after Daniel disappeared, Claire had tried to find him. But her father had stopped her. He told her Daniel had taken another job and wanted nothing to do with the company. Claire believed him. Until recently, a company audit uncovered old internal emails. One of them contained a message from Claire's father to a senior executive. Daniel had been fired not because he was wrong. He had been fired because the mechanic who exposed the aircraft problem threatened the chairman's reputation. Claire's voice cracked when she said it. "I found out 3 months ago." Daniel sat completely still. 7 years of silence suddenly had an explanation, but not an excuse. Daniel looked toward the window. "You could have found me." "I know." That answer hurt more than any excuse could have. Claire didn't defend herself. She simply said, "I was too proud to question my father, and too busy trying to become the person everyone expected me to be." Daniel swallowed. "I was angry. I know. I wanted you to come looking." "I did." His eyes lifted. Claire reached into her purse, and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. It was an old letter. Never delivered. Daniel opened it. It contained only 3 sentences. I should have believed you. I'm sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here. Daniel stared at the handwriting. Then he noticed the date. 7 years ago. His eyes filled. But the biggest surprise came next. Claire wasn't asking him to return to her company. She wasn't offering him money. She wasn't trying to repair the past with a grand gesture. Instead, she said, I want to build something your daughter would have needed. Daniel frowned. Claire explained that her company was creating a scholarship and vocational program for children of working-class employees, children whose parents couldn't afford to let them dream bigger. She wanted Daniel to help design the practical training program, not as an executive, not as a favor, as the person who understood what it meant to keep going when life gave you no room to stop. Daniel almost refused. Then he thought about Lily, about the nights he'd sat beside her hospital bed, about the toolbox where he'd hidden his wedding ring, about all the years he had spent believing survival was the same thing as living. He looked at Claire. I don't know if I can forgive you. Claire nodded. I don't expect you to. Daniel folded the letter carefully. But maybe I can stop running. Months later, Lily stood on a small stage at the opening ceremony of the new training center. She looked at her father, then at Claire, and smiled. Afterward, Daniel found Claire standing alone outside. You okay? He asked. She nodded. I'm learning. He smiled. So am I. They didn't kiss. They didn't promise forever. There was no magical ending. Just 2 people who had lost 7 years finally deciding they didn't have to lose the next 7. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out his wife's old wedding ring. Claire looked at it. I thought you kept that in a toolbox. I did. He looked at the ring for a moment. Some things belong in your heart, not your toolbox. Claire smiled through tears. And Daniel finally understood something he had spent years avoiding. Sometimes the person you run from isn't the person who hurt you. Sometimes you're running from the version of yourself that was too afraid to heal. And healing doesn't always mean getting the past back. Sometimes it simply means finding the courage to stop letting the past decide where you go next.